And I simply believe that there is no credible constitutional basis or successful model where people have different rights based on their background and their ancestry because they're in a partnership between races.
It's been 8 months since details of the ACT Party's proposed Treaty Principles Bill first publicly emerged. But on Tuesday night, for the first time, the bill's architect, ACT leader David Seymour, publicly debated its purpose with Māori. Hosted by the Working Group Political Podcast, Seymour took on Te Runanga o Toa Rangatira Chief Executive Helmut Modlik in an hour-long debate. It didn't take long to settle, or not settle, on one of the more contentious issues, sovereignty.
The idea that the rangatira of 1840 would totally surrender their mana to a couple of blokes and some missionaries, it's preposterous. Culturally and psychologically impossible.
They actually realised that they were dealing with the representatives of the only global superpower. And you can put it the other way
preposterous.
Around. Imagine for a moment, well, what's preposterous is the idea
let them finish on it. Sorry.
What you could equally say it's preposterous that Queen Victoria, who was in charge of that superpower, arguably the most powerful woman in the world at the time, would enter into a partnership with 100,000 Māori on the other side of the world, when she certainly didn't consider herself to be in partnership with any other group.
David Seymour has been consistent with his reasons for introducing the Treaty Principles Bill, even if it doesn't appear to have much of a future. And while there's been widespread condemnation from Māori, the reasons for their resistance has been less clear. Post-debate, we took the opportunity to sit down with Helmut Modlik. Why the debate? I mean, we already know that National and New Zealand First aren't going to support this bill any further, so what's the point?
Well, David's been pretty public and forthright about the fact that he intends to pursue, obviously for 6 months in the first instance, with the hearings that will take place at Parliament around his bill, that he's on a bit of a mission to communicate to the wider community his views on things to do with the treaty and this bill in particular, and has constantly said that he'd like to catalyse or initiate a debate and a discussion. And I wasn't hearing any debate or discussion. I was only hearing, curated sound bites. So I thought, why not? And that was what last night was all about, just to start that conversation.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? And he has been quite consistent with what he sees as the issues and why he's putting forward this bill. It's been a bit more difficult to gauge why te iwi Māori are so concerned about this proposal.
Oh, look, the idea that one party to our foundational document, which spells out all of the parameters for us being here legitimately, the idea that one party to that agreement can unilaterally change it in the way that he signalled and leave us unwinding the project of truth and reconciliation, the path of truth and reconciliation that we've been on for 4 or 5 decades. Yeah, that's not a direction of travel that anyone in the Māori community that I've met is interested in contemplating. And so, no, we need to speak up and we need to ensure that the truth is told and that we get back on the right path.
And this has come about because ACT in particular aren't happy with the direction that the courts and the Waitangi Tribunal have taken over the past 50 years.
Yes. So we're a similar vintage, Mike, and you'll recall that when we were young, nobody talked about the treaty or te tiriti. We were silent on it until 1975, the decision by Justice Prendergast in 1877 that te tiriti o Waitangi was a simple nullity because the Maori signatories were ignorant savages. That dictated the state of the treaty in law in New Zealand until 1975. Didn't exist. Once the activism of the 70s gave rise to increased visibility in the community generally, to the injustices of the past, the colonial sins as it were, over the next decade or so, via our historians, via the activism, it got to a point where by the 80s, people weren't willing in this country to just keep turning a blind eye to the treaty and its issues. And so the political capital developed, politicians got involved, then we found ourselves staring at cases in the courts, And ultimately, that gave rise to the decisions in statute and the interpretations of tribunals and the courts, which gave rise to the emergent decisions around what is the treaty, what does it mean in the 20th century at that time. Now, all of that is what's discomforted ACT, because they've got a vision for New Zealand that makes the treaty disappear in any material sense unless Parliament tells us what it means. So we had to say something. We had to not allow that 30, 40-year project, as I say, to be reversed. And that's where we're at today.
At the heart of ACT's bill is the proposal to replace the many treaty principles that have been developed over decades with 3 new ones determined by Cabinet.
How do you reconcile the Crown's position that they have sovereignty and the coexistence of rangatiratanga? Those are not entirely reconcilable. What is reconcilable is the existence of governorship or kawanatanga and the coexistence of rangatira. And the funny thing is, those are the actual words. So here's what happened. Because of that, you're never going to get the courts or Parliament to say, actually, we didn't actually get the legitimate right to set ourselves up here, so let's do something elegant, and they invented the idea of the partnership. Now, you've got to concede that was a Gordian knot solution that was quite elegant in stage.
I don't disagree that
That's
happened.
where it came from.
I mean, that's a pretty good summary of the facts of the last 50 years, but the only problem was it wasn't the politicians, it was by and large the Waitangi Tribunal, the public service,
the all of them, the tribunals, the politicians,
and the
all of them.
academics.
All
It was
of
a
them.
small group of people who, if they were experts, why did they produce a society that said we're a partnership between races and we have different rights and different origins when that has never worked anywhere else in the world?
ACT's proposed Treaty Principles Bill will see Parliament rather than the courts decide the treaty principles.
Well, David actually wants to see it, to have it placed in the hands of the court of public opinion, So that you think about that. So we'll remove from out of the responsibility of our professional judiciary, whose job it is to evaluate words in context, to decipher their meaning, and we'll give it to the court of public opinion and ask them to tell us what they would like it to mean. That just doesn't make sense, right? That's like somebody taking a contract between 2 counterparties. One of the parties to the contract says, not liking that anymore. Let's go over to my family and ask all of my relations whether they would come up with some better terms that fits us, and then let's make that the new terms of the contract. That's analogous to what ACT's proposing.
Yeah, it might be the right thing to do, but he seems to be
not the right thing to
successful.
do.
He seems successful. I mean, he's been very clear and concise with his messaging, and it has an audience.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. Look, the truth of the matter is that, again, sorry to hark on about our age, but for the majority of the last 184 years, our historical reality just has not been visible. Did you get a class in school that taught about the history of colonial New Zealand? I'm a reasonably educated man. That's a newly emergent thing. Our history, the facts, have just been obscured, not shared. To be frank, it's because they're embarrassing, they're shameful. But we don't need to be ashamed. My point is today, it's our opportunity to look with clear eyes at the available evidence, at the historical evidence, the logical and linguistic evidence, and say, okay, that's what happened. What are we going to do about that today? That's all we need to do today.
Look, it's all really interesting, but I actually don't see what you're trying to say or why you disagree with me, because the Treaty Principles Bill I propose starts out by saying the first principle is that the government has the right to govern and Parliament has the absolute right to make laws.
Where did it get that right?
Now, well, if that's going to be stated in the Treaty Principles Bill, you'd have to say it's coming from the treaty. So in a way, I think you actually agree with me. You agree with liberal democracy. You want to live in a country where everyone's equal. You want to live in a country where the treaty is our founding document and the right to govern comes out of it. It comes out of that principle. So it's not really clear what you actually disagree with.
Let me clarify for you. Let me clarify
you should
for
be
you.
a supporter of the Treaty Principles
Here it is.
Bill.
Concentrate on what I'm about to say. So given that all the evidence and everything I've cited demonstrates that, in fact, ngā rangatira, ngā hapu of Aotearoa did not cede sovereignty, right? On what basis, what legitimate basis did the British Parliament then, in 1852, pass and implement the New Zealand Constitution Act 1852 that established the House of Representatives? On what basis? What legitimate basis? The answer is none.
Because the perception, I guess, is that Māori are getting allowances or special circumstances because they're Māori.
Well, look, that's an unfortunate and also disingenuous frame. Look, there's no way to come at that without being, without being a little bit.
Hoha.
Oh, look. So look, if I could talk about the Te Aka Whai Ora, the Māori Health Authority. Right, I was asked to be a member of the board 3 months before the last election, and I accepted, and I thought, well, look, I was going to be the shortest appointment that I've ever had, or we can make a difference. Now, Te Aka Whai Ora as a standalone Māori Health Authority was created, in fact, out of a Waitangi Tribunal decision, but more substantively as an attempt to innovate and create a response to the entrenched and intractable health inequalities that our mainstream, standardised, one-size-fits-all health system that had operated forever was not making any inroads into. So tell me why it's a bad idea to create a group of people and empower them to innovate and to see if they can conceive and deliver something different that might shift the dial on those entrenched health inequalities that gives rise to so much expense, pain, loss of life. Why is that a bad idea? Because the targets are Maori, really? Okay. So my point is that when we're talking about inequality and our desire to try and close those gaps, anything that you do to try and achieve that surely is a benefit to the community. Now, I know what ACT will say about that. They'll try to close one eye about the ethnicity and its correlation to the harms and the inequalities. They'll challenge us to find other alternative markers or correlates. But why? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Anyway, I'll leave that there. It isn't about equality, Mike. It is about trying to be effective. It's trying about being direct. And in this case, as I say, I think they're missing the mark.
And the real question is, why are people so angry and so opposed to having this debate?
Helmet. Yeah, you're just repeating your slogans, bro. So here's the issue. So it's Article 2 that speaks to property rights. And I'm here to tell you, gentlemen,
I agree.
2 cents in the dollar is not a settlement. That's a down payment. Right? And
you said I'm just repeating slogans.
As you as libertarians, you should do better than that. The thing that is still problematic is Article 1, which is the root of the matter, right? The distribution of power in order to rule and make laws and all the rest of it. That's the debate.
The only other piece that's missing that I would reiterate, and which ACT and David seem intent on ignoring, is anytime you've got a compact, a contract, a treaty between two parties, both parties got to come back to the table if you want to change it. Right? Not the whānau of one, and definitely not one, both. And thankfully, in the near future, I am expecting that the tribes of New Zealand will have agreed a mechanism for us to act in unison so that we can present a shared voice to engage with the kāwanatanga and have this conversation. So I look forward to that day when we can do that and perhaps finally put to bed what does that coexistence look like.
I was at Waitangi earlier this year, and the comment was made that David Seymour had done what no other Māori leader had been able to do in years, and that was bring Māori together.
Yes, look, I had a similar observation made to me by one of the hard cases in my He said, we should give that fella a blingin' a knighthood. Look, if I could just make this, look, Labour pushed it. There was a large caucus of Māori MPs. The trajectory of sincere desire to work out what this this relationship between the rangatiratanga and kawanatanga looked like meant they so I wasn't surprised that an Anglo-Saxon kickback emerged. But I think we were all surprised at the mean-spiritedness, the callousness. Really, the reo? You're going to cut money for the reo? I get why they might want to save money around health-ish, but really, so we're gonna do second verse same as the first verse and hope we get a different outcome. We know what that's a signal of. So no, the speed, the callousness, the mean spirit, that was a shock.
For more content just like this and all the latest business and political news, head over to mbr.co.nz.